Okay, YouTube, this is Acid Roots. I've got another P.O.D. album review. So I was hyped enough about discovering this group and learning about them more, but I was really hoping that they did not just burn out like a lot of new metal groups circa 2003 to 2005. Now, this did happen, but they also managed to have a resurgence. But for the most part, they did manage to get at least one or two hits off of each of their albums between 2003 and 2010, whenever the album before this album came out, which is Murdered Love. So this is probably their second biggest album next to Satellite. And I was specifically attracted to it because they said that the producer who worked on Satellite with them returned for this one, but he had left after Satellite. So, you know, anytime a person says that they're going to return to the roots, which is the larger reason, it's usually an interesting process just because we are allowed to see how much they've changed when in between they did it and did it last. So that was something, you know, if we're going to call this like Satellite 2 or the return of P.O.D., even though this album came out 4 years ago, the whole thing is there are hits on this project. But the same thing that plagues Satellite plagues this release. I do think some work needs to be done on the album cuts. Now, another thing to know about P.O.D. is they kind of combine things. They weren't just a new metal group. They weren't just a rap rock group. They apparently were getting a little bit of reggae, some punk rock, and maybe a little bit of pop rock in there as well. So, closest thing I can sum that up with is probably No Doubt and Papa Roach from 2006. Those are the two things that this album reminded me of when I wasn't listening to songs where there was rapping on. And the thing is the guitar is not as gnarly as it was, but then I don't really have enough knowledge of P.O.D. to even present those facts either. So what I may be thinking is I'm hoping for something more like Mudvayne, but they do handle the rock pretty well, but it's softer. So whether or not you want to refer to them as a Christian rock group, I am listening to the music, so that's really what I find myself saying first, is I want to know that I'm going to have a good time. But, you know, this music is lighter in tone than even something like Limp Bizkit or Papa Roach in the later years. So with that, this album did have 4 radio songs. Most of them are in the first half. The only one I didn't prefer was Beautiful. So Lost in Forever, Higher, these are both kind of rap metal type songs, especially Higher. Another one that was kind of like that was On Fire. Murdered Love, I feel as if that probably should have been another radio song. But the whole idea behind it is I feel like, you know, singles are kind of like attempts. You know, supposing you have basketballs and you only get 3 shots to make a goal, to make a point. I feel like that's what singles are. Kind of like, you know, you got 3 shots at this, you better make them count. And it sucks because you don't get the attempt to see some of the other songs that could have been chosen. Now, Beautiful is one of those kind of post-grunge, alternative metal, sing-songy songs where it just seems like they're more reflecting than anything else. You've heard countless songs like this, but I know that the audience has to extend to more than just going nuts. So, but 3 out of 4 of the radio songs do this, or do the kind of more metal-esque thing. It just is toned down. So if you're looking for a return to Satellite, I'd probably say that Higher is probably reminiscent of Alive or Boom. And On Fire is not quite as gnarly, but that's probably like Satellite, the title track. So that there isn't, you know, the big problem with this is there's not really a song like Youth of the Nation, even though I think these songs did chart pretty high. You know, folks will say Beautiful was a hit, but I'm less lenient on songs like that than other folks. So there were the hits on here, so you don't have to worry about that. I'm glad that P.O.D. was able to share with us, you know, an additional album that revitalized their success, and I wish I would have paid attention to when this album was making noise, just to hear all the plays it's got. So I like 6 out of 11 songs, basically 5. One was the song I was on the fence about, and that was Bad Boy. But the 5 songs are Eyes, Murdered Love, Higher, Lost and Forever, and On Fire. Now, all of these, Eyes is probably one of the rougher songs on here. Murdered Love is also. Higher is another one. Basically, the first 4 or 5 songs are what we're going to find most of the heat. And then things kind of shift into different territories. Like I said, this is kind of a blended album, so you're going to be getting some other stuff. And, you know, just if you like diversity, you should be at home. But, you know, right now where I'm at is metal and new metal. So that's what we're getting. So I will give this album a 5 out of 10. And that's because there were less songs than Satellite, but it basically is. There's one of their best albums just because it had just as many hits on it, virtually. So it's right at home. The new metal hits were the largest ones. I think most people like their new metal stuff as well, so shows what they should be doing. Now, The Future, they did come out in 2015, but it didn't make as much noise as this album. And the social score, I will give this album like a 6.5. This means how well it plays around your friends. 6.5 out of 10, just because there were 3 high charting songs and a 4th one just for bonus measures. So the only thing left to say is, can this record be topped? I think the answer is it could. We could have used less riff-raff and more concentration at what they're best at. Alright, subscribe for more fun.